Ruaidhri O'Connor of the Irish Independent is with us. Good evening.
Hey Joe, how's it going?
Great, full of lactic acid, I presume. Well done in the marathon.
Yeah, I can barely. I was Mick suggested coming in, and I was like, I was going to jump on the bike, and then I realised that I couldn't move my legs properly, so it was better to do it online. So,
Good man.
but yeah, it went well.
Did it? You survived, and happy with your time? Did you run all the way? Tougher than you thought?
I made all the classic mistakes, but I ran all the way. Yeah, no, I got in 4:25 or so, and set out too quick. Made the traditional mistake of setting off too quick, and paid the price in the last 5 or 6 kilometers. But no, it was really like it's an amazing day. I've never really appreciated how good it is, and I think even if I don't run it again, I'll be definitely going back to cheer on those who do.
Good man. And what have you raised for Crumlin Children's Hospital in the end?
Yeah, I think we're at 31,000 now,
Wow.
which is a lot more than I ever could have envisaged. But thanks to listeners who would have contributed and people who've done it, it was a pretty emotional day running past Crumlin, where my son Malky died, and even finishing at Hollis Street where he was born was just it all felt quite symmetrical, and it was an amazing day. And to be able to there's people in there as you ran past who are going through what we went through earlier this year, so to be able to try and help them is pretty special.
Well, congratulations. Amazing thing to have done.
Thanks, Joe.
So Saturday, it's coming quickly into view now. Ireland will name their team Thursday. I've just gone through the South African team there. What jumps out to you?
It's the fact, I think, that they've put what would have traditionally been the bomb squad front row in the starting lineup. So what they would have done in the World Cup and in most of their big games was have Kitsoff, Marks and Malherbe coming on after about 45 minutes against a tired front row, plus a couple of big second rows as well, and basically grinding the opposition into submission. And for this game, they're starting that trio. So looking at their profile, looking at their weight, they're there to scrummage, and I think they're there to grind the Irish front row trio of Porter, Sheehan and Furlong down. And we all know how important Porter, Sheehan and Furlong are to the way Ireland play in terms of their ability to catch pass, their ability to carry, to win collisions in the tight, because we don't have the size of second row that South Africa can bring to the table, and even a back row for that carrying threat. So Porter's really important to Ireland. He's seen as a bit of a scrummaging liability by opposition nations. He's been highlighted by referees. He's fallen foul a couple of times, and I think putting Malherbe there, he's listed at 125 kilos. The Stormers have him down at 130. That's more than 20 stone. He's an enormous man. He's just he blocks out the sun when he comes into the room. Kitsoff is probably the best loose head scrummager in the world. Marks is a phenomenon, and then they have really good props to bring off the bench, even though it's not those guys. Actually, what they're bringing off the bench is a more dynamic, smaller unit who can all play. So it's almost a reverse of what they traditionally have done, and that strikes me that they're going to go after Ireland physically right from the start, which is no real surprise, but the way they're going about it is very interesting.
Yeah, okay. So what's their logic in the usual way that they do it then?
Well, I think that maybe what they're looking at is an Ireland front row. Maybe they see the weakness in the Ireland front row replacements and think that we can get our starting props out and actually finish them. That we need to match our best. Ireland's best front row is so superior to the second best front row that we'll get our best front rows out there. They generally finish with their strongest side. So it's interesting that they've gone and done that. And there's no the guys are bringing off the bench, Nietzsche, Bongi Omanambi and Vincent Koch, who hasn't played this season. He's only just signed because he was at Wasps. He's only just signed for Stade Francais. They're really good players as well. They're just not maybe the mass and maybe not the technicians, but Koch is still one of the best scrummaging tight heads in the world. So they're not weak coming off the bench, whereas they possibly see a weakness in our. They possibly think that trio can still get on top, but that with this starting trio, they can match what Ireland have to start and better them and grind. They just want to sap the life out of the Irish tight five, and in particular those front rows. They want to drain them down through the maul, through the scrum. They're going to bring just that, that slow poison game plan that they implement so well. It's so effective, and it's not pretty to watch, but it's enthralling when they get it right. So I think that's part of what they're trying to do. They also have Etzebeth and Lou de Jager, two enormous men in the second row. They've got Peter Steff to 6, so they have size throughout, and they have then the bench to bring on. But they brought two open sides, effectively, two fetchers off the bench as well. So they want to go after Ireland's breakdown in that last 25 minutes. So the game plan is I think they're kind of flipping what they normally do, which is going to be interesting to see.
And that's not even to mention the back three. For all that we talk about their physicality, I mean, they're lightning.
They are, and what that tight five do is that they tire out opposition teams, so that when they come up against Cheslin Kolbe, they're absolutely wrecked. And when he starts doing what he does, he just skips by them because they don't have the energy left to kind of make those tackles that they would normally do. So there's method to it's not madness, it's method to the kind of conservative approach. And we saw in that World Cup final in against England, and they're not playing as well as they were in that World Cup. But in that World Cup final, they cut loose in the last 20 minutes. They scored wonderful tries, but it was based on the fact that it absolutely exhausted England. I mean, Joe Molloy just didn't have the energy to lay a glove on Mapipi for his try, and or maybe it was Cheslin Kolbe for his try. But they were quality tries that kind of embellished what had been a brutal, bruising, ultra effective rugby game plan and performance. And I don't necessarily. I think I think everyone who watched the Lions tour kind of came away. Not everyone, but I came away kind of embittered by it. But I think it was because the Lions tried to match their style with a similar style. But when it's a clash of styles like we're going to see on Saturday, I think when Ireland, I think that's going to be fascinating to watch. It's not necessarily ragging on the South Africans; they're entitled to play the way they want to play. But in order to beat them, you're going to have to come up with something.
South Africa's form this year, they've played 9 games, 6 wins and 3 defeats. So they lost to Australia away in August. They lost to New Zealand as well at home in August. And then they lost to Wales in Bloemfontein in July, 13 points to 12. But they did win that series 2-1. So 9 games, 6 wins, 3 defeats. So not invincible either. And the point has been made. You look at the loss of Am in particular at outside centre. Damian Willemse is a 10, Pollard being injured, and Jantis, who's obviously played quite a bit for them this year, omitted for disciplinary reasons. So they're not at full strength. Ireland's injury profile is pretty reasonable. Ireland at home, Ireland at the start of a season and fresh, South Africa at the end of a long year. To what extent is the psychology here important with a view to the World Cup game, that if Ireland can't beat them here under these circumstances, then come World Cup, neutral venue and presumably a fresher South Africa, that it will be a major advantage to South Africa if they win in Dublin? Or is this weekend irrelevant?
No, I think it's relevant. I don't think anyone who followed the build up to the 2019 World Cup and the damage that was inflicted by England in the Six Nations, but also in what we all thought was going to be an irrelevant World Cup warm up, inflicted. So if South Africa come to Dublin and dominate the Irish pack in the way that I have a slight fear that they're going to, because we've seen this collection of forwards dominated by La Rochelle. We've seen them dominated by Saracens. We've seen them dominated by England at times. Even when Ireland won in the Six Nations, the Irish scrum crumbled at Twickenham. There is a risk there for Ireland that they are built to play against the likes of New Zealand and play that, and their game plan really works against New Zealand, whereas they don't have the critical mass in a sense to overcome a team of the athletic profile of a South Africa. And that's the challenge for them. And I don't think a defeat is necessarily damaging, but it's the nature of it. If South Africa come and they are dominant in every way, and they basically win the line-out maul, eke penalties out of the line-out maul, eke penalties out of the scrum, kick to the corner, maul over, and repeatedly do that in the way that Saracens have done to Leinster over the years and to Munster, then that could be psychologically damaging to this Ireland team who definitely took a hit from their run into the 2019 World Cup. So that's the fear, but you've got to, from an Ireland point of view, you've got to put your chest out and say, we're number one in the world for a reason. We've just won a series in New Zealand. We were a whisker away from winning in Paris that would have potentially led to a Grand Slam. We had the best defence in the Six Nations, the best attack in the Six Nations. France are probably the best team in the world right now, on many levels, and Ireland ran them close. And if we get our stuff right on Saturday, we're faster than the South African team. We can move these massive men around the pack, and we can find openings, and we can inflict the psychological damage on them. So there's no doubt there's a risk there for Ireland, but there's also massive potential upside if they can be the ones inflicting the damage. And there's nothing to say that they can't. It's a really, because these teams haven't played in 5 years, and when they last did, South Africa were completely unrecognisable shambles of an outfit. It's a very different proposition, and that's what makes this game utterly fascinating. Like, since Ireland beat New Zealand last year, I've been looking forward to this game. Not in the summer, the November game. I came away from that game that night. I want to see this Irish team play against South Africa, because I think that's the true test of where they're at. South Africa and France have the profile of player that Ireland struggle with, and if they can find a way of beating them, if they can do it playing the way they do, like it's almost a good versus bad scenario. You know, they play rugby that kind of, they're thrilling to watch, and if it can be effective against a team that play this slow poison forward dominant game, then, like, you know, they can write their own narrative.
I was watching back over the weekend South Africa, New Zealand in South Africa from the summer, and one of the things, I mean, anytime you watch them, the physicality jumps out, but the other aspect of their play that day, and this is a game they lost ultimately, but I mean, the line speed in defence is frightening. They are all or nothing, shooting up out of the line. And that day, New Zealand managed to cope very well. They had little clever cross kicks. They had several passes before contact and managed to create openings. At times in the past, Ireland have struggled with that kind of ferocious line speed. It does feel of late, over the last 12 brilliant months, in particular over Farrell, that they've got to grips with that type of a defence. But the South African one is as good as anything out there.
Yeah, and Jacques Nienaber, who Munster fans will know well, and Munster players in particular will know well and respect highly, is the head coach of South Africa. Like, Rassie Erasmus pulls an awful lot of the strings, but defence is his zone, and he is an excellent, clever, intelligent defence coach. A self-made man. He didn't play the game at the highest level. He's kind of come up on Erasmus's bootstraps, and he is an impressive figure who will have studied Ireland in intricate detail. I think every coach in the world is looking at Ireland right now. It was striking at the URC launch. Every team was talking about trying to mirror how Ireland plays. So they're also looking at how Ireland can be shut down. And that, again, was the challenge in 19 when Ireland came around a corner in front, but Eddie Jones worked out a way of beating them. And Ireland need to keep evolving, keep getting better at what they do. They do challenge that line speed by going both ways. So that just when it looks like they're going to attack right, Gibson-Park might go down the blind side with a kind of a wave of players who fold late and come around and just challenge that line speed, because often it's not as effective on the blind side, because teams are they can pull out unexpected moves at the last minute, which disguise what their intentions are, which fools line speed sometimes. But there's no question this is a massive offensive challenge for Johnny Sexton and his team, and they need their captain to be as smart as he's shown himself to be in the last couple of months. They need him to be at the top of their game, because if they're losing those collisions, he's going to have a difficult afternoon. And whether it's Murray or Gibson-Park, both of those may be digging out dirty ball, and Ireland may need to go to the air more than they would ordinarily like. They may need to be smarter about this. They may need to pick their battles in the way that they did in Paris, and when they get their moments, take them. So it's a different challenge for Ireland, and that's what's, again, it's a far more interesting game than a lot of the games we've seen, because we just don't know how Ireland will adapt to the way South Africa play.
That parallel with 2018 is so striking in so many ways. You mentioned other coaches very much looking at Ireland, and that feels akin to what happened and was exploited at the beginning of 19 when England and Jones came out with a plan to beat Ireland and did it in Dublin. And so I think that's maybe one of the reasons nobody's getting overly excited or carried away with themselves, either within the squad or even looking on with regard to the World Cup, because there's just an understanding of how much rugby there still is to be played. That said, it does feel like the team had almost stopped evolving at this stage in 18 into 19, whereas Farrell and Sexton and the team at large now do seem more cognizant of the fact that things are going to have to keep changing, and they can't just sit in their hands and pray the World Cup gets here as quickly as possible.
It was funny. Farrell was asked about it last week, and he said it's not necessarily about evolving; it's about getting better at what we do. So they feel like they have a very strong template, and they can keep refining it and keep getting better with it. And that's he was there for the whole 18 into 19 experience, and that's the lesson he's taken from it. The RFU have put huge stock into the psychological side of things, and David Nucifora did his briefing last week and was talking about they've hired a full-time sports psychologist now. They've Gary Keegan there with the team to try and make sure that they're mentally strong as well. So even if they do endure the kind of defeat that they had in 2019 Six Nations, that they can bounce back, that it's not going to knock them off kilter. But yeah, everyone's studying them, and they're you're world number one. You're playing an exciting, innovative, attacking brand of play. You're brilliant to watch. Every analyst in the world is trying to figure out what you're doing, both to see whether they can copy bits and pieces from what you're doing, but also how can we stop you if we come up against you. Like, I think the big thing that's stopping people from getting too excited really is the fact that Ireland, South Africa, France, and New Zealand are on the same side of the draw, and you know, even the greatest Irish team of all time on their greatest day, you know, is in a 50-50 battle against any of those opponents. So that's where I think it's difficult to get carried away this time around. But there certainly is you know, they need to discover a couple of players during this window, but they also need to just keep advancing, just keep adding little layers, little wriggles onto what they're doing, or wrinkles onto what they're doing, so that they're just one step ahead of the competition.
You mentioned Murray or Gibson-Park. What are the selection calls for Thursday?
Back three's big, you know. Gibson-Park and Hugo Keenan haven't played any rugby this season. Jacob Stockdale's coming back from an injury. Back three, Earls, Lowe are out. There's a few more injuries there as well. Andrew Conway's not available. So it's the makeup of that back three. Does he go for the kind of players who've been playing regularly? Say, Mike Lowry at fullback and Balakoon on one wing with Matt Hansen on the other, or does he trust in Stockdale with left boot to come in for Lowe and trust in Hugo Keenan based on what he's done for the team? And then the other big one is scrum half, because Gibson-Park just hasn't played. So does he put him on the bench and hope that he gets 25 minutes? It's a hamstring, so that could be tricky. Or do you play, do you start Murray? He also physically matches up well against South Africa. He has that physical presence, that defensive solidity that's there. And, although he's not the most sexy figure in rugby right now, every time he's selected, he's kind of taken over that role from Rob Kearney, that whenever he's selected as groans of derision, he's still a high quality rugby player with bags of experience. So Craig Casey had an injury coming into this week. He might have been more in contention, I think. I could be wrong. He could be right in there, but he's having a good season, so he could have been in there. And it's whether Ireland go try and match up 6-2 on the bench with 6 forwards. I don't think they will. They might be tempted given what they're seeing from the South Africans. But other than that, I think the pack relatively picks itself as long as everyone's fit and healthy.
Conor Murray was across the Sunday papers talking about his 100th cap. So this would be his 100th cap, or will be his 100th cap on Saturday. And one of the lines and one of the pieces was, as he wins his 100th cap, he's never been more uncherished, which is unfortunate, but probably true with Murray. It's worth remembering what an extraordinary player he's been for Ireland, and maybe he's been overly derided, I think, of late.
Yeah, and he's not an old man. He's still got a couple of years left. And I think I listened to your paper review yesterday or on Sunday, and that that injury definitely took a toll in 2018, and he hasn't been the same player, and he's under pressure at Munster because Casey's coming strong, and he doesn't do what Gibson-Park does. So it's not like for like, but for this game, behind a pack that may be getting overwhelmed a little bit, maybe he's the man to be there to steady the ship, and with all of his experience, kind of get the best out of the players around them, and then you bring on Gibson-Park to run the legs off those big South Africans in the last 20 minutes. It's an interesting one. Farrell's definitely said, Conor Murray will win his 100 cap in this game, so he's involved. It's just whether he's going to be starting her off the bench is the big call. And look, he's never let Ireland down. It's not, there's not one point where you could say he's cost Ireland the game or anything. It's just, I think, because of the way Gibson-Park plays and the excitement that he brings, he's maybe suffering in comparison to that.
So, final thoughts with a view to Saturday then. You've mentioned your worries about the pack, and they're well-founded, I suspect. What way do you think it's going to go on Saturday?
It's really hard to tell. Like, the lack of form guide is difficult. I think Ireland would have liked to build into this fixture and play the games in reverse, with Australia first, Fiji in the middle, and South Africa last up, and that would allow them to build some form into it. The fact that Ireland have a couple of players that have not played yet this season, that's a big concern, and I think we'll know more on Thursday when the team is named, and whether those players are backed, or whether he's going with is it time to give Mike Lowry a game, and a big game, and find out more about him, because ultimately this is a November test and not a Six Nations game or a World Cup game, and maybe Hugo Keenan will be injured by the time these teams next play. But I have a sense, and I've always long had a sense, that Ireland will struggle. This Ireland pack will struggle against the France and South Africa, France's and South Africa's of this world, really. France and South Africa, and I think that may be in evidence on Saturday. That front row to me is a frightening one, and if they can get it right, if they can get enough scrums, like, Ireland need to not drop the ball on Saturday. They need to make sure that whatever the defensive pressure that's coming on is, they need to not play into the South African hands. They need to keep the ball alive. They need to move it quickly, and they need to just not give up scrums. They need to keep the ball on the pitch. They need to play at a high tempo. They need to tire the South Africans out, because they are more kind of dynamic, more probably fitter, more mobile, more agile, and they can challenge South Africa if they keep the ball alive and keep challenging South Africa in different ways in the way that they do. But if they get drawn into an arm wrestle and kind of let South Africa kind of get that line out, get that maul, slow it down, kick it to the corner, maul over, or earn a penalty, get a scrum, sap the legs out of them, they could be in trouble. But this is where we find out about this Ireland team, and they look really good so far. And they've overcome pretty much every hurdle apart from France in this cycle. So that's what makes this so fascinating as a one-off game with that World Cup in mind next year. So I think if you gave me a fiver, I'd probably put on South Africa right now. But again, I haven't seen the Ireland team, so still a bit cautious.
No, that's fair enough. Ruaidhri O'Connor of the Irish Independent, thank you very much.
Thanks, Joe.
Cheers.